I've sort of got some background noise in there. It's provided with a brief background that took behind SODA and what gave the genesis to Strategyfinder. Then, as Christina said, have a simulated demonstration of Strategyfinder where we'll have 3 people putting in material to give a sense of what it would look and feel like. Then I'll hand over to Colin. He's going to give a tour of the facilities, so to speak. So that will give you a sense of what other features that we won't be able to do on a relatively short demonstration, and what other features that we've got, before concluding this hour with just some discussion about how we've been using it over the last 6 to 9 months and some sort of future features, etc. So Colin, I'm going to hand over to you just to pick up on the key conceptual base.
Okay, as some of you, I suspect, are very familiar with SODA and our background, but just some of the key points just to emphasize for those of you who are not familiar. Problem definition, as I'm sure all of you know, is crucial to any piece of operational research work. Solving the wrong problem is something that we too often do, and so problem structuring is fundamental to avoid getting at the wrong problem. Cognitive psychology, problem solving is about changing people's minds, and so understanding something about the way in which that happens is crucial. The background of our work is personal construct theory. Social psychology, crucial bit in that is procedural justice, and that's just about being listened to, the significance of that, the significance of having a voice in an organization, feeling that you've been listened to. It's not about democracy, it's about actually just enabling people to take ownership of the solutions that you're coming up with. Quite often in a lot of the operational research work, we do the work that we do behind the scenes, so to speak, and a lot of the modeling work becomes too opaque, and people find it difficult to have any ownership, and therefore implementation is just too difficult. International conciliation is an important background to all of the design of, in particular, Group Explorer, the forerunner to Strategyfinder and Strategyfinder. We work in social enterprises where people bring to bear different expertise and different experience. And a part of what we're trying to do in conciliation is actually find a way of melding expertise and experience together and exploiting it as best we can. In principle, the getting to yes stuff, Fisher and Urey, is just simply, or put simply, is about stop fighting between 2 options A and B and try and together create option C that you can get a higher ownership of. So you can see the notion of ownership is being crucial to the processes that we've been involved in. The bottom of that slide, there's just 3 of the recent books. If you're interested totally in SODA, the recent rewrite of our chapter in the OU book, work by Martin Reynolds and Sue Holwell, is the place to go. The 2011 book is the principles of the strategy making stuff that we do, which relates totally to strategic problem solving, messy problem solving. And the book by John Bryson, Fran and myself, Visual Strategy. The reason for putting that there is that's quite a nifty one because it's just based around cartoons and based around a real case study. So it just follows a case through. So it's quite a nice read for people who want to get introduced to mapping and the principles that we're going through today. Okay, next. Just a bit of background to Genesis. Some of you might remember this, having popped through the list of names of participants. We started with COPE a long time ago. This was in the days of MS-DOS. Very restrictive in terms of what you could do. We were working on big television screens with management teams at that time. Extraordinary business. Moved across to Decision Explorer, which is still on the market, which was the Windows-based version of COPE. Then to Group Explorer, which was actually about the ability of being able to enable a group of people to build a model very quickly where they're in the same place and operating at the same time. Windows Server based, so with all the problems installation of that. Then we moved to Strategyfinder, which is what we're looking at today, and that's moving into web-based facility. The next bit of that slide is simply about the sorts of uses that we're accustomed with, Fran and I. It's obviously in a lot of the work that we've done, it's been about messy problem solving, where the solving of the problem comes out of the session itself. You get agreement through negotiation and you get commitment. We've written a lot of stuff about that. We've done a lot of work in conflict management as well, both across organisations, originally within trade union conflicts and so on, and negotiation support. Systemic risk modelling, we're doing quite a lot of that at the moment. Some of you probably know about the work we've done in project management on disruption delay on very big claim litigation things. Most recent one was a claim for 3.5 billion euros that we're involved in, and the result of the work that we did on that is reckoned by the client to have saved them 2 billion. Just a pity we didn't have a share in that payoff. And finally, of course, there's a lot of stuff that we've done, which is just where the problem structuring is about trying to go grab a hold of the right problem and take it into the use of all the techniques that we know as operational researchers. Okay, next. And this is just try and summarizing. If we're dealing with messy problem solving, it's about making things happen. That implementation point, as you'll see, is crucial to it. Getting enough ownership that people want to do what they've decided is the right thing to do. But it does mean knowing something about the desirable outcomes. The crucial bit, though, is that when we listen to people talking, they're proposing solutions usually. They're proposing things that should be done and offering a reason why it should be done. So they're essentially coming forward with a means ends notion, where if we do this, then this will happen. There's cognitive mapping originally based on Kelly, and that's gone, of course, and morphed into causal mapping for group work. So causal mapping is simply about trying to actually build a model, a directed graph, which represents the means ends, pulling together the expertise, judgment, and experience of the people we're working with. Usually we're working with teams that are anything between half a dozen to 20 people when we're using things like Strategyfinder, although with Group Explorer we have worked with, on one occasion, 180 vice presidents of a multinational, split that into groups of 5 though, to actually make it workable, all sitting in a big theatre in the hotel and there for 2 days working together. And that was just the presidents and vice presidents of the operation. So that's very big, much more difficult to operate with, much more difficult to get ownership, of course. Okay, over to you, Fran.
Okay, thanks very much, Colin. So as I said, we'd have a brief introduction and then have a go at doing a simulation. Now, because I can't flip between slides and the web browser as seamlessly as I was hoping to do, I'll go through a couple of slides and then make the change to the actual process. So what we're going to do is focus on something that is particularly, I think, apposite to all of you in the UK. Problem solving for the NHS. What are the issues facing the NHS in getting the COVID vaccination to all? And I can only sympathise with everybody in the UK with your situation. We are so blessed here, and as far as we don't have any community spread. Now, I was going to go straight to the software, but I think given shifting between packages is a little bit more challenging, what would be worth doing is I'm going to show people the software. We have got Christina, Martin, and Colin putting a material in. I know Colin knows how to do this really well, but to give people some sense on how best to express the issues, rather than just putting a very short statement that doesn't provide much detail, if you could think about wording it in a way that adds that clarifying detail. So rather just management communication, being a little bit more comprehensive, a little bit more action oriented in terms of sort out mechanisms for internal exchange of product improvement ideas. If you've got 2 things together, if I could encourage you to split them, so instead of improved efficiency and effectiveness, separate the efficiency from some of the effectiveness elements. And then in terms of cost base, just trying to make it a little bit clearer, and also why it could be an opportunity as well as a problem. So just thinking about how you might express it, because the reason for this is, one, trying to get some action orientation, but secondly, providing a bit more clarity helps people begin to understand how one another sees it, and therefore that helps in the negotiation and conversations. So I'm now going to stop sharing that screen and then share the screen with the software on it, I hope. And hopefully everybody now can see a web browser screen, and in the center of it is a statement that says, welcome to this ORS PSM SIG session. So if anybody can't see that, please let us know.
Christina, Martin and I can't see it, of course, because the model's locked. We can only see model.
That's right, I was going to get there.
Okay. Then you hope everyone can see, we can't.
I'm just wanting people to see my screen.
Yeah, okay.
Yeah, I can see your screen, Fran, but this writing is incredibly small.
You can't make that bigger, unfortunately. It's because you can. There is a way, I think, of actually blowing up the Zoom screen so that it'll fill the full screen, which might help.
Is that a bit bigger?
Yes, that is.
That's a bit better. Yeah, that's you're zooming in on you.
Yeah, I've zoomed in a bit.
I still can't read it.
Try going to full screen. That'll help in your Zoom.
Yeah, if you go to full screen and then click and hold and drag the windows with our pictures on it over to the right, you can essentially get Fran's screen to pretty much fill your screen. Then I can read it.
I think I'm going to move on because I'm conscious of time. Hopefully that's helped most people be able to read it. In terms of getting started, and just to give some background, one of the things that we found is, as we've just had illustrated here, when people join, when you're working in a web-based world, people join using a range of different devices, a range of different browsers. We strongly recommend Chrome. Firefox is fine, and if you're on a Mac, Safari is fine. However, Edge, we do know, has problems. It's a pretty flaky browser. And typically I'd get people just to try logging on and see. Their screen would say that the model was locked, but at least get to that point so that we know people have logged on correctly. What I can do is, and there's an icon here up in the top right, I can lock the model until the session is started. So I'm now going to unlock the model, and hopefully that allows Colin, Christina and Martin to be able to now access the particular software. I'm going to presume they'll screen if they can't. And if you each could, as it says there, Colin is here, if Christina and Martin could find a piece of white space, double click and just put their name in so that we can see that they are able to access it as well, that would be excellent. We found this start with getting people to type their names in, a good way of ensuring that people are online and able to sort of get into the software before we start on the issue proper. Christina, are you okay? Able to put something in? Martin is here, but I haven't seen anything from Christina yet.
Where do I click to put my name in?
Anywhere
Just
you like.
click anywhere on the white screen, just double click, and you'll see a little box appear, and you can type in what you want to enter.
Oh, it's not working at the moment.
So just double click, and you'll get a little box that says enter statement, and you can just then, so I could say Fran is here, and that would also appear on the screen.
You may find you have to drag
My fault,
it down.
I wasn't going into the model. I had to refresh the screen first to unlock the model, so that's what happened here. Yeah.
Oh, okay. And that's one of the reasons for just doing this particular activity, is just to help make sure that everybody, brilliant, is on the same page. So that's excellent. as with Decision Explorer, you can have a number of views onto the model. And so what I'm going to do is move to a different view, and I would request that Christina, Colin and Martin also click on Issue Gather. And that will, and I'll have to blow this screen up as well so that people can read it. Hopefully that's big enough for people to be able to read. Could I ask you to start putting some comments in using the coding or recommendations that I showed on a slide?
Oh, you're ahead of me there. That's exactly what I was going to put.
So we've got something from somebody say, combat the anti-vaxxers on a roll. Get enough vaccine fast. Capacity at the endpoints. As a facilitator, one of the things that's interesting is it's no different if you're brainstorming in any way. But the strangest thing about doing it online is you feel a bit isolated and you're not quite sure how much of the airtime to fill talking. These silences can feel a little bit strange. So we've got enough trained staff. So we're getting some stuff about staff, got some stuff about bureaucracy. We've got something about the logistics of getting enough of the vaccine to the right places quickly. What else might we have? What the facilitator can do is just continue to move things around and organize them. So organize commercial arrangements, that's another one.
You on your screen, Fran, you've got, at least I can see, a whole load of blue scratches.
Somebody is being able to, with a pen, write on the screen. I can't control that, Colin. That's one of the participants with a pen.
Okay.
I can't control that. So there's quite a lot of the logistics, of which partly trained staff is that. We've got something about getting people to the centres.
I wonder where that blue's coming from. Is that you,
And
Martin?
somebody with a pencil, I think, just writing on the Zoom screen.
I don't actually see it on my screen. That's the really weird bit.
No, I don't see it. It's not me writing, so I don't know quite what's happening.
No, it's a bit odd.
I'm just ignoring it.
Okay.
Or trying
Seems
to.
like a good move.
So in many ways, this is not dissimilar. If you were using Group Explorers, people would be putting their ideas in via whatever device they had, and they'd be appearing up on the a public screen. In this situation, as you put your statements in, you see yours in the context of many others. And typically you'd have more than 3 participants working. As Colin said, we've had sessions with Group Explorer that were really quite considerably large. Sessions I've been doing with the online system tended to be a bit smaller than 150. I think the biggest I've had in terms of online sessions about 15, 16. I know Colin's had a few more.
Perhaps worth pointing out that as I'm putting stuff in, I can edit my own statements, but I can't edit anybody else's.
Yeah, that's a nice point. We have a sort of a tier of access rights. So the facilitator is what's often referred to as a super user, and can edit, can delete, and can do a whole lot of features that the participants, users cannot do, because one of the things we were concerned about is if you disagreed with what somebody else had said, that you go along and delete it or edit it to the way you wanted it to be. We felt that that was probably not a good thing, and therefore if we wanted to edit it, it had to be with the group in conversation. So you've moved into a more social discursive stage where we're trying to bring some convergence together rather than this stage, which tends to be more of a divergent stage. So we seem to be
very easy to edit, I have to say. You just have to double click on it and you can edit it very easily. That's really good, very smooth.
Excellent. So, I think, we've got a cluster here, it seems to me, to be around communication. So we've got communications to patients, government messaging, managed social media, and I suppose to a degree, communication could also touch on the get, track and trace to work. We've definitely got quite a lot around the logistics, so sorting out the logistics of getting the vaccine to the right place. That's influenced by organising commercial arrangements to get vaccines through quickly. It's obviously related to capacity at the end point. Get enough vaccine fast, possibly related to 12 about the commercial arrangements. The storage of vaccine after opening the package might be related to the capacity at end points. Sort out how to get second shot for many, again, around the logistics, and enough trained staff, which has a logistic implication. Sorting out how people can get to the big centres, probably also around the logistics. We've got then comments like, stop Boris from making wild claims and expectations. That's probably to a degree related to stop the stupid bureaucracy of retired vaccinators. I'm not sure I understand that. I wonder if somebody could tell me a little bit more about that. That's obviously something I've missed from the UK. Martin, Christina, Colin, do you want to say a little bit more about that one?
Yeah, you know, if you're in the UK, retired doctors and so on have to fill in the most enormous amount of bureaucracy to be able to become a vaccinator, and a lot of them have stopped bothering. They have to identify who their employer was going right back to 1975 and show certificates and all sorts of stuff.
So actually it's a capacity issue. It relates to 10, I would have thought.
Yes, thank you. And that's a really nice point. As you say, it relates to 10. So what we can start doing is put some links in that show how 11 relates to 10. And if
just a comment, Fran, about we've got a demonstration of, at this stage, we'd probably pick on something like 17 and 20 down the line, communication to patients and government messaging, and ask her put that into, to add what it is that's being proposed there, what the issue is. Even if it was just to put better communication to patients or better government messaging to try and get something that implies an action. And gradually we find that people, as they're a part of a group, get used to that idea, and getting the action orientation is what management is about. And it's interesting in the research we've done how they change their mode of thinking from just making arguments to actually think about what has to be done and how they as managers have to do it. And that's really something that clients have always commented on as being particularly helpful. So even number 10 is enough trained staff. It's presumably get enough trained staff and so on. So you get these words in and it helps people think in an implementation manner.
So I could encourage all three of you to edit yours and perhaps elaborate them a little. That would be very helpful. I'll give you a couple more minutes to put a few more ideas in, and then we'll move on.
Fran, is there a way to get a hand that helps me move around the page?
You can, when you say move around the page, do you mean make it larger or smaller, or?
No, I've been able to make it smaller and larger so that I can see more of the comments. But what I'm having trouble with is I've moved down to see some comments and then I can't actually get back up again to see all the rest of them.
You'll notice at the top you've got some icons, and I've normally done this at the beginning. There's one that's got arrows pointing northeast, northwest, southeast, southwest. That makes everything fit to the view, and that just tidies up your screen. The other useful one is the one to the right of it, which again just refreshes the screen. Because one of the difficulties of working on browsers and people with internets of very varying speeds is that a refresh every now and then is useful, because everything gets a little out of sync.
If you're zooming, you can also hold the control key down, and hold the left mouse button down and use the arrows, the sort of 4 directional arrows, and move the whole thing left and right and up and down.
Ah, marvelous, thank you.
Which is really helpful.
Now, I think encourage perhaps a little more elaboration on the communication to patients and the government messaging, just to give us a bit more sense of what that's about. That would be helpful. So what is it about the communication to patients? Is it better communication to patients? Is it more frequent communication? That's a form of better. I see Colin, I presume it's Colin, but it could well be others. I've started to also, thank you, that's great, start putting some links in. The links are, as you can see, you can move the whole screen around as well. The links are, as Colin put it, it's causal links. So if we get enough vaccines fast, that may help capacity at the end point. If we, I suppose the actual bit is manage the storage of vaccine after opening the packs, that would lead to the capacity at endpoints. If we can supply at scale, and if we can sort out the logistics of getting the vaccines. So start to be putting these links in. As you can see, you can start moving the material around to build up the clusters of material so that you can see these clusters emerging.
Is that what you meant, Fran? 17 and 20, a little bit clarity.
Yeah, that's
on the messaging.
good. That's good. And I would have thought if government messaging is clear and doesn't contradict local measuring, that's also going to help with 17, isn't it?
Yes,
so
absolutely. Those two things are really linked together. I should put an arrow on that then, shouldn't I? Or do I let you guys do the arrowing?
No, well, I put it on, but please feel free to put your own arrows in.
Okay.
I think various people are doing that already. I'm just trying to move these around, make it relatively tidy. So the moment, what we're ending up with is a cluster around getting people vaccinated. So it's possible for us to be able just to identify those that seem to be quite central and provide them with a different style so that they can be easily recognized. That's no different from a Decision Explorer creating styles. The second one that seems to be sort of building up a cluster is around capacity at endpoints. So we're able to start identifying at any stage those that seem to be themes or sort of busy points.
So
I'm
Fran,
a
I'm
little
quite,
bit confused as to how reducing the pressure on hospitals leads to enough trained staff. I wonder if it's actually the other way around. If you have enough trained staff, that would reduce the pressure on hospitals. Would that be right?
Now, I put that in because they, on my argument there is that if you can get track and trace to work, then you can reduce the pressure on hospitals. Reduce pressure on hospitals. Some of the staff that are currently dealing with COVID can actually deal with vaccination.
Okay.
In other words, they're trained. It helps enough trained staff to vaccinate.
We've got here a double-headed one. So the government messaging needs to be clear and not contradict local messaging, and communication to patients at the right time for both doses and clarity. Instructions, should it be double-headed? Is it a feedback loop? Which is a double-headed arrow by implication?
apologies, I was muted there. Yes, you're absolutely right. I think those two things do feed in and out of each other. So I'll just tap on that and see. Change direction. No, that's not what I want, is it?
You did have them feeding off one another. Actually, you did have a double-headed arrow there.
Yes, I just wanted to check that that was accurate. That's exactly what you wanted. That's all. I was just doing that as a check.
Ah, okay. So I'm not seeing a double-headed arrow.
Try refreshing your screen. That might help you see a double-headed arrow.
I've gone out of there. Oh no, what have I done? Oh, there we go. Ah, that's better.
What is the anti-vaxxers? What is the what are the anti-vaxxers doing in terms of stopping the COVID vaccination getting to all? Are they just refusing to take the injection so that you can't get the 80% coverage?
And they're encouraging other people not to have it as well.
Okay, so can we get some of that material in as to the sort of why that's an issue?
You move two in a bit, Fran, on top right. Then on the fit to screen for everybody, we might just get a bit more space. See, it might increase the size of the font in effect. And now do a fit to screen. Yeah, that's a bit bigger.
Try and make that a bit bigger. It's probably as far as we're going to get. I'm going to give that one a style. It's a little bit contrived, but for a demonstration purpose. So what we're able to do is also allow you to do some preferencing and rating. And the reason I've chosen those three is so that we can focus on those. And I'm going to try doing a preferencing. So
You got to. Oh, yeah, no, sorry.
I have selected them.
Yeah, no, I couldn't see it on your screen.
It's all right.
I always start by forgetting to select them.
So what we've got to do is preferencing. This is a little contrived because there's only three of them that I've selected, but to try and make it quick and to show the process. So I'm going to give you some green sticky dots, and they're the ones we think are really important. And I'm going to give you some red sticky dots. Well, they call them magenta there. But you don't think they're important. It's a little
I
contrived.
guess
isn't it,
though,
really?
Fran, is that we're probably all going to put the green dots all on get people vaccinated, because it's a goal.
Yes, well, I'm just trying to demonstrate a process. So that's what I would be.
So why
I
don't
would be
we
seeing.
constrain us to not putting anything on 25.
Oh, okay. So just on those two.
Yeah, just to demonstrate it will do.
Actually, is there a rating? Let's just do a new rating on that.
Yeah, rating might be better, because otherwise, otherwise I'm going to bung them all on one.
So much for anonymity.
Mhm.
But you can't have the most important. There's only two.
Just to take us through what the options you can do there then.
So obviously you can put the title up there. You can change the range, so we can make it maximum value as much as you want, all the way up to 100. You can also have a negative scale as well if you want. Quite useful if you're doing strategy work and you're looking at performance indicators and you want to be able to demonstrate that you've made progress positively, but you can also go backwards. So that's worth being able to reflect on. And down here are the two that we are able to rate on. So I'm going to start the rating there. And hopefully Christina, Martin and Colin's screens will change. Oh, that was shouldn't have made them a single unit. That's trying to describe what I'm doing whilst doing it, which is never a good idea.
And I screwed you up there by suggesting only two. Of course, with only two, we can put 1 at 0 to 1 at 100. So it's just, but never mind. It gets the point, doesn't it?
So if you guys could just do your ratings, it will look a bit strange, but never mind. So somebody's already put something on 0.
And what the users have got, those of us have got, we've got these scales where we can move a blob between 0 and 100, and then got to confirm the rating afterwards. So what Fran is showing you is what the facilitator sees, not what the user sees.
And that's quite useful because although the anonymity is important for all the participants, it's quite important for the facilitator to know A, how people are progressing, but also B, who's putting their preferences or ratings where, because that gives you some sense of how to manage the politics. If you've got a senior person being quite different from the rest, then you need to know that to facilitate the group effectively. So I think that's everybody having done it. I don't know how to get rid of this, which is, oh, here it is. Do that, drop it down there. So I can now, the other thing you can see here on this one is that that's the average, and that gives a sense of standard deviation. But if we close the rating and return to the model, and then we turn the rating on, now we're able to see the results. And we can see the results as a really useless little graph because I put too many units in there. But you can see where people have put their preferences. You can see both the average and standard deviation. So again, you can see 2 have put it on 99 and 1 on 62. So you can turn these little graphs on and off. And likewise, if we did preferencing, we'd also be able to see a similar thing. Colin, do you want to take over and just do a bit of a tour? Colin?
Sorry, I couldn't. I heard you, but I couldn't. It was scrambled.
I said, do you want to take over and do a little bit of a tour of the other features?
Okay.
Do you want me to stop sharing so that you can share your screen?
Yeah, just as a comment, somebody in the chat has just said, wouldn't it be useful just to get a process flow diagram up here? I mean, that's not the work that we usually do. What we're trying to do here is literally get means end stuff, and therefore help a group come to decisions. Of course, you could use something like this to get a group to build a process chart, but I'm not sure what the benefits would be from a group doing that rather than someone who's an expert on the process. Anyway, you need to go back to your shared screen, Fran, too.
Oh, I thought you were going to do it on your shared screen. Sorry. Do you want me to go back to mine?
Yeah, go back to yours. It's probably the easiest thing to do to save farting around with a lot of sharing.
You should now be back on it.
You can see on the facilitator screen, there's this bundle of icons at the top. That number of icons is reduced and is much smaller for the users because we don't want them to be doing quite a lot of things. But it's perhaps just worth starting with some of the analysis you can do of directed graphs. So if you go to the analysis menu, Fran, some of these are pretty obvious and follow through from Decision Explorer. You can count the ins, count the outs, count the ins and the outs, a sort of domain analysis. In our experience, those with a high domain, high ins and outs are usually pretty critical areas to explore with the group first. Next one, heads and tails, you can identify the endpoints. And the tails, which are essentially where the most detailed options lie. Obviously, in this one, not surprisingly, if you did a heads analysis, you'd get 25, get people vaccinated, and that would become, you then get a discussion with the group whether that's a goal, whether that's something that is a desirable outcome for the problem solving, and change the style to reflect that. In fact, why don't you change that style, Fran, just so it was you just click on it and
Okay.
yeah, and Ashley is commenting on the rating scale. You can use the rating scale for any purpose. You know, what we're doing for this demonstration was something that is sort of meaningless, really. Didn't have a proper criteria, didn't have enough things to rate or anything like that. But we sometimes use the rating scale just in response to that one. Rating scale for things like estimating, where you set the rating scale on for a project and say the maximum this project of anybody we reckon is €500,000 euros. Let's actually get everybody to make their own estimate of what it would be on that scale. Then you go back to a gather to explain, ask people to explain what influenced their estimate. So it's a Delphi technique in principle, in using the rating scale as gradually homing in on a real estimate. We've done that with a lot of organizations, and it's very, very powerful. It actually, in a lot of cases, has turned out to give a much better estimate than the estimators have given. So you can use these facilities for all sorts of things, is the point that I'm making there. So back to analysis. You can see Fran has changed 25, changed the style to a gold style. Then you've got detect loops. Well, if you click on that and do it, you can detect loops either on the whole model or on the view. So if you do it on the view, should pick up, and you can see it's highlighted those two things, the double-headed, that's the only feedback loop on this diagram. And if you just click on the chevron by the numbers, it just explains it, how it works. And if you click on those, you can then, as you've seen, you get, they start flashing red to just bring everybody's attention to it. So it's a way, I'm working on a risk systemicity model at the moment that has over 3,000 feedback loops in it. And the need to be able to do this sort of analysis is very important, of course. Go back to the analysis. We then got, well, that's just an explore around, range up and down, that's straightforward. Interconnected groups is like a cluster analysis. You go to advanced analysis. You've now got a whole series of things. You can get influence range and dependency range are very helpful for a group because essentially you can pick on one statement and ask what it influences going up the tree, or you can start at the top of anything and ask what influences it, what actions will drive it. So very helpful. And then you've got a collapse function, which is really helpful, where you can pick out just a number of different statements and actually collapse the model by looking for the roots between them. So it's a way of getting a summary of a model. Very helpful indeed. You've got the arrangement, detect strongly connected is fairly straightforward. Closeness is the traditional directed graph analysis of closeness and betweenness as well. So I'm rattling along here because we're going to be running out of time, and then if we want to get some Q&As, go back up the top on the icons, maybe go to the right-hand end, and that's the lock screen, which Fran pointed out at the beginning. Next to that is something that's really helpful when starting a group, which is what we call a blind gather. That means that when you turn that on, you can set the number of statements or number of items that people can put in, which is very helpful. If you're working with, as I was yesterday, with a group of 16 people, we asked them, we restricted the number of things they could put in to 3 each. And that, if you think about it, is going to give you 3 times 16, 48 statements on the screen in one go. But also, it means that people can throw things at their own screen. The facilitator sees them, but none of the other participants can see it. So they're not influenced by what other people are doing. So that's quite a useful one. The one next door to it is what we call presentation mode. So that's the way in which you can lock everybody else's screen and do present to them what's on the facilitator screen. Then you've just got a list option and a map option. Don't need to go through those. The zoom option, which you've seen, the refresh options, and then just going further to the left, right to the left, you've got a search thing, and that will search and enables you to bring things on. We haven't got anything off this, so if we search for something, it's already there. But maybe you could search on something, Fran. So it comes up, if that wasn't already on this particular view, there's a little icon next to it, and you click on the icon, it will bring it onto the view. And the next door to the right of that, the little chevron set, that's a way of clicking somebody putting in a whole stream of links. So you can put 83 plus 62 plus 1, and it'll put in all the arrows in one go. So it actually enables you to put a whole line of argument in, as Fran is doing at the moment. She's just put one extra link in there. But it's useful for putting a whole stream in. And some participants prefer doing that rather than using the mouse. And then the other icons are just controlling views, creating new views, moving stuff around from one view to another, and so on. So I think the other thing that the facilitators got in the analysis thing, and you'll be able to use it if you go to the analysis, Fran, which we currently, you can see at the bottom there, we have statement authors. There's an interesting ethical issue around that. The facilitator needs to declare, of course, at the beginning of a workshop that they actually can see who's put in what. And that's obviously a very helpful device. At the moment, you can't turn that off because there are instances where clearly it's not proper for anybody, including the facilitator, to know the statement authors. We've got to have that changed so that you do have that as an option. It's particularly the case if you're running a project where data protection stuff matters and all those sorts of things. So anyway, that I think just gives a quick overview of what the software is trying to do. I mean, its principle, of course, is that it's in the environment we're in at the moment. It's about having people operating same time but different place. The big problem that we've had in doing the programming for this, of course, is that this screen, this whiteboard, is infinite. And for the programmers, that's been a real problem because they've got, as you probably know, each browser programs differently. Everybody's got a different computer they're using. Everybody's got a different resolution of screen and so on. It's a menace. We probably actually need to move to a situation where the size of the screen is not infinite, but allows at least sort of 90 to 100 statements on a screen, and that would resolve quite a lot of programming issues. This is just an interesting one. I was just talking a moment ago about different time, different place. One of our colleagues has been doing quite a lot of work in Scotland with general practitioners, and the work that he's been doing has all been around about 1 hour to 1.5 hours. And the thing that he's been finding phenomenally useful with Strategyfinder is that in 1.5 hours, you can get something constructive rather than the sort of aimless discussion that you normally get on a Zoom call or a Skype call, with Skype running in the background. And you can see a quote there from Nick Dunn in that use. And that was done in 1.5 hours. So it's actually changed the timing. We've always worked, Fran and I, on a sort of a day workshop between 4 1.5-hour workshops. Now we're moving more towards 4 1.5-hour workshops at different times, because you can do it if you've got everybody working from home. So it's changing the way in which we're working quite a lot, and Fran will say a little bit about that in a moment. Okay, Fran. Mentioned some of these anyway, but do you want to say a bit about these then, Fran?
I thought you were going to do this, but sorry.
Just I was thinking about the focus group work that you've been doing.
Yeah, I mean, I got probably the biggest use of Strategyfinder for me has been recently is I was supposed to be running a whole lot of group explorer workshops around the country on a particular research project on man-made marine infrastructure and stakeholder values. We wanted to be able to elicit different stakeholders across the board, from oil and gas to recreational fishing, from commercial fishing to different communities, from NGOs to federal and state regulators. And it allowed us to run a whole series of focus groups where not only were we able to get people to agree to participate, which was always going to be a challenge, but they could participate from wherever they were within Australia. So on a number of them, we were running the focus groups with people from Darwin, which is in the Northern Territories, from Brisbane, Sydney, Melbourne, and in one case also Tasmania. So it allowed us to really be able to capture the knowledge, the wisdom of a range of different participants. But it wasn't just a one-way experience. In listening to each participant listened to the other participant, looked at how the material they surfaced and connected with their own material, and each went away with a much better understanding of the man-made marine infrastructure space in a way that they probably wouldn't have otherwise. So again, it's that shared meaning and coming up with some options. Colin's been using it, as he said, in the risk modeling, and we've both been using it in the problem structuring space. Colin, do you want to say anything more on the problem structure space, or should I pick up on the interesting issues? I'm going to accept that shake of head as being a no. I mean, just in terms of some facilitation things, and these are very much, I guess, first impressions. I found when you're facilitating a group using this, it demands a slightly different approach in terms of timing. When you're asking questions, when you're asking people to contribute, partly because people turn themselves on mute to allow people to be able to hear one another more cleanly, as we have done for this session. If you then want people to talk to you, you've got to give them those few seconds to turn themselves back on again. When you ask people to put contributions in or ask a question, again, there's often a much longer silence. And I can't work out if it's a longer silence or just a more uncomfortable one, because you can't see people. It's changed the way I've asked questions. If you say, is everybody all right? My guess is everybody quietly nods, but I can't see those noddings. So I don't know whether they are all right. So I've now shifted sort of the questions in terms of checking how people are doing is, right now, could anybody let me know if they're having problems? So I'm trying to help people contribute effectively. I've all, on a regular basis, check all can see the screen. And one of the ways I've done that is actually, along with my super user screen, I have a little laptop off to my left as just a straightforward user. So at any stage, I can see what pretty much every participant's seeing, and that's been incredibly helpful. Humor has been a challenge. Usually, I make the assumption that if I've got a great big grin across my face when I say something, people realize that I'm not being deadly serious. But if you haven't got good video or no video at all, which is sometimes the case because of bandwidth issues, then being careful with humor really, I think, is important. In terms of facilitation, typically we're using one screen with Strategyfinder on it. And the second screen will be whatever package you're using for the communications, whether it's WebEx, Skype, Zoom, Jitsi, Microsoft Teams, or whatever else there is out there. And I have to say that I've done a number of workshops where I haven't met people before. And packages like WebEx, where when someone talks, their name or their initials pop up, has been enormously helpful for me being able to say, oh, thanks, Joe, because Joe's initials came up. So I can get a sense of who's speaking to me and make it feel a bit more personal, because otherwise it can feel quite disembodied. As Colin showed, looking at the author spread, we can at least see the participation spread and make sure that everybody's feeling comfortable being able to contribute. And one of the other things I've found with using WebExes or the equivalent is you can have both public chat but private chat. And I've used that to check whether people are doing okay. And they've used it to let me know if they've got to pop out for a phone call or something. Because unlike a face-to-face workshop where you can see someone sort of get up, take their phone and walk out of the room, you can't see that when you're doing it online. So there are little things that I found quite useful in terms of the facilitations aspect.
I would just add that I've been using breakout rooms in Zoom very effectively with Strategyfinder. Teams has now introduced breakout rooms at the beginning of December. I haven't tried it yet to find out whether it works well as the Zoom does, but there's certainly Zoom breakout rooms is good and works very well for subgroup work when you've got a large group to work with.
Sorry, Colin, can I just quickly ask you there, are you using that with different Strategyfinder pages, or are you all working on the same page?
Each group is working on a different view in the same model. Now, there are issues when you've got overlapping statements, of course, across views and so on. And sometimes we have to say, nobody's allowed, you come back from the breakout room to the full group and you propose a deletion or you propose a change in arrow. And then the facilitator does it. But you can do gathering of more material very easily in each of the breakout rooms where each of them are working on a different part of the model.
Well, I think we've probably picked up a lot of the technical stuff already. Bandwidth, you know, sort of just the differences between Perth, where I live, and where Colin lives. We've got quite different speeds. Everybody's going to have different screen sizes and therefore readability. Some people work across two devices. They have a phone with WebEx on it or whatever, whether it's Jitsi, Teams, for one, you know, for the communication, and use their laptop for being able to look at Strategyfinder. So that's quite useful. In terms of participants, go on, Christina.
I'm sorry, I'm conscious that we're actually running out of time and some people are going to have to start going. So I was wondering if we could move to questions as soon as possible.
Sure. I mean, I think the only other thing I'd say is one of the things that surprised me was the anonymity and how Group Explorer allowed anonymity by putting your ideas in directly, but doing it in a different place as well as through a device. A lot of participants have said how much better they feel about being open. So I think that's been quite important for me. So, yep, I'll hand over for questions and answers.
Brilliant. Thanks to you both. I think it's fascinating having the sort of the demo of the tool. We've got some questions about how to get licenses for Strategyfinder. Are there what's the best way of getting hold of the tool?
You need to contact Robert. His address is up there. He's the owner of the software and he's the chief executive of the development company that's developing it. So you can see his email address there as well. As a matter of interest, if you go to formfinder.at, you'll see some architectural software that he developed before he got involved with us, and it's also fascinating stuff, well worth looking at. Anyway, contact Robert directly. But if you could copy Fran and I in, then we know that we can have a conversation with Robert about where it's come from.
Perfect, thank you. There's a question from Nikki. I know Nikki Jobson's now left the session, but I'll catch up with her at some point during the next couple of weeks. She's asking about causal loop mapping and essentially trying to get people not to map a process. So do you have this experience? My experience is very much, I work with a lot of military people, and they'll always come along and tell you about a process. But when you get to sort of, okay, so what could we do? And I can see that the sort of the techniques that you've talked through today in figuring out sort of what do you need to do to deliver X, etc., is quite good. Are there any other sort of tips on avoiding essentially building a process model?
It's a state. Sorry, you were going to say something.
Go on. Yeah.
All I was going to say was that, as we indicated earlier, after people have dumped about a couple of statements each, we usually take a pause and, in a sense, teach them a little bit about the nature of causality and the nature of the statements we want. And they learn very quickly, but we do it on a gradual basis. And they, as I said about action orientation, they very quickly usually cotton on to that and actually start thinking in terms of acting as if they were managers. Because people have a habit of just sort of making statements, not actually taking a sense of actually changing the world. And management is about changing the world. And that trying to get them into the mode of thinking about means ends, where if you do this, then I believe that that will happen. That's where we're tapping into their experience and wisdom, because usually, certainly with strategy work that they do, there's no evidence that they can provide to sustain the causal link. But you're tapping into a group of people whose views are respected. I mean, if you've got people in the group, of course, whose views are respected, you have to ask the question why they were there in the first place. And that's another interesting topic in its own right, is how you choose who to have around the table or who to have on the Zoom call.
Yes, there's an art, isn't there, to structuring these things. Yeah, absolutely. Just moving on then to Dave Snowden's point about Delphi. Dave, do you want to unmute and just ask your question?
Yeah, it's a general criticism of eliminative techniques that you get to the end of the process and you realize something at the start was more significant than you realized, and that you see that in Delphi a lot. You want to go back to the point where, to be quite honest, I refuse to take part in Delphi processes anymore. And I think the dot scoring type thing is therefore part of that problem. You start to narrow down too quickly. It's called premature convergence in complexity theory. And that, to me, links in with what I think is the big issue here, which is the abductive question. Because if I took at the vaccination problem, you're talking about a system where there isn't linear material causality. There's far too much entanglement of different things, including attitudes. Right? So the issue for me, and that's the thing I worked on for years with DARPA programs and everything else, is you have to find a way to objectify abductive insights early on in the cycle, rather than a causal eliminative model. So I'm trying to position the tool. I can see how it works if you've got a well-defined problem where the causal-like things can be identified and scored. But I don't see how it would work in a highly complex problem with high levels of entanglement, yeah, and where you don't have linear material causality in any meaningful way. At that point, I think you'd need something else to feed into it. And at least that's my impression. I could be wrong, hence the question.
I think a lot of what you said we'd go along with. I mean, there are a lot of issues that we're addressing as operational research consultants, which are founded upon the practicality of the situations you're facing and the speed with which you've got to move a group. And your first point about actually moving too quickly towards closure is an enormous tension for a facilitator, because they know exactly what you said. and trying to choose the points. The principle of this, the words we use from the sort of our literature, is that we're working with as a boundary object and a transitional object. And the point about the thing being continually in transition is a very significant point, and that enables or makes it more likely that you're able to revisit. But as you say, preferencing and rating is usually used by a facilitator to get a sense of whether there is any consensus emerging. And there's the colouring of it and so on, whether there's any consensus about what the key points are and so on. But we do it usually many times during a workshop. This is not a, you don't do a rating or preferencing once, and you don't rate and preference the same things once either. But that doesn't solve the problems you're addressing. It actually ameliorates them in some ways. I mean, I'm sure you know Judea Pearl's work. I mean, that's a good place for to start thinking about some of those issues, particularly his book called The Book of Why, which makes no reference to any of the sort of stuff that we do at all, rather irritatingly. I think it was published last year. But it's a good book to get in. I mean, the subtitle of the book is The New Science of Cause and Effect.
Just a question from Mary McKee is, where's the information stored? And I was actually going to ask, is it possible to sort of download this as a network kind of model? Can you download it so you can put it into, I don't know, Visio or something like that and use it in a different sort of package?
It's stored on a server, a secure server. And yes, you can. Well, we can import it into Decision Explorer, and I dare say in the future it'll be able to be imported into other things as well. You can take snapshots.
At the moment, it sits on a server in Austria. That's what it was. Or that when you set up something, we're on this server called FACE, which some of you might work out actually is an acronym for Fran, Ackermann, and Colin Eden. That's our server. And it's all very, very secure. But the first 6 months of the programmers working on this project was actually spent, it seems, on developing the security aspects of it, which was a bit irritating for Fran and I as we watched them do that, which we wanted them to get on with the job. But they know about security because of the work they did on Form Finder, which has to be highly secure.
I think we're very much out of time now, so it's probably time to wrap up. Christina, is there anything that you wanted to add in terms of questions?
I had one question, which I know would be quite close to Fran's heart. Teaching of this stuff. Do you teach it at all? Do you use it in your teaching? Do you try to do it to help people to understand the problem structuring process at all?
I've used it on my MBA class to help them do the strategy modelling, and that helps them in terms of having the conversations within each group, because I get them to break into groups to work on it. It helps them manage the complexity and be able to think about the issues, the goals, competencies, and then be able to build scenarios. So yes, what they have loved about it is that I run it in an intensive way is 2 days, and then a fortnight, 2 days, and then a final day. The intervening period allows them to all be able to continue working with the model, refining it, catching themselves up, having conversations without having to get together for it. They love that ability to be able to make progress. So yes, I have used it. For this year's class, I should be making, one of the learnings I've got is make a whole lot of little videos, because you can explain it to them once when you're teaching the class. There's a certain amount they remember, there's a certain amount they don't. And so I want to make little short videos for how to use it for each of the steps in the strategy making process, so that they can refer to that as well. So yes, I have used it for teaching. I will be doing so, and I also want to start using it in some exec ed.
Yeah, I think it's a marvelous tool for showing people how the theory practice into theory kind of works, because they're doing it and then they're seeing it, and then you can bring the theory to it and then help to iterate on that and encourage their thinking. Marvelous.
Brilliant. Thank you very much, Colin. Thanks, Fran. Absolutely fascinating to see the tool and have a go at using it. So we're really grateful to you both. Yeah, thanks to everyone for joining us this morning.
Thanks. Bye, everyone.
Thank you all very much for coming. Lovely to see you all.
Yeah.
And thank you so much, Fran and Corin, for doing that session for us.
You're welcome. All the best.
Bye-bye.
Bye. Thanks.